talking about the way we currently talk about sustainability, net zero targets. You're not surprised I'm going to say it's all nonsense.
Well, it's difficult when people are encouraged to, build a team, and then with everything that's going on in the world, they're going to shrewdly look for how can I get it done cheaper.
The world's ability to change course from the status quo radically, as much as I think it's required. I think the pandemic was a big opportunity to hit the big reset button.
Just don't believe in climate change. I've heard that literally to my face. Some people don't believe in climate change. Some people don't believe in measures of climate or carbon, and some people very much do. That they'll protest and they'll have loud voices about it.
A new moral code, surely. A moral code that maybe has been lost over time, or do we need a new one?
We look at ourselves as owners without accountability to others. We're not owners, we are stewards, we're responsible.
With a global financial collapse on the horizon, even more detrimental than in 2008. What are the state politicians and privateers going to do as we face imminent failure? Well, there is hope in one man, ready to confront the challenge more than the rest, with a mission to change the world and to create a freer society. He might just be our only catalyst left and the source of truth that the next generation deserves. Phillip Ullmann, thought leader and social entrepreneur.
Okay, our final area of discussion is resource management and sustainability. How do we balance the individual's desire to produce with finite resources, and is this tension bound to fail? I think we'll start with you, Josh.
I think, again, going back to some of the themes of the discussions from earlier, the paradigm that we live in culturally around economic growth, I think increasingly as the environmental issues intensify that we're facing, we start to see the extreme weather conditions happening more regularly, and the scientific consensus is clearly around that that's a man-made phenomenon. Then, I think we need to be looking seriously at how we organise society in light of, the kind of climate emergency, and looking to do things sustainably. And I think the paradigm around ever-increasing consumption, it is in many ways directly contradictory to some of those pressing environmental concerns. And, Philip just mentioned a phrase there, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, and I think that's particularly relevant as it comes to the climate emergency that we're facing. So, I do think we might need to look at some more radical ways around how we sustainably produce in order to tackle the climate emergency.
Philip, how radical do we have to be?
Very radical. Yes, so let me just start by talking about the way we currently talk about sustainability, net zero targets. You're not surprised I'm going to say it's all nonsense. No, it is. And it's meaningless, and it's all manipulated, and it doesn't result in accountability or responsibility, because no one understands the figures. I mean, how do you measure net zero? It's the same as GDP. It's just a nonsense, and it gives power to the politicians and does not allow democracy to work. But what it does give me the opportunity to do is to talk about the change of direction that my life has taken over the last few months, which does address the problem of how we start to build a sustainable planet, that we don't overconsume, we don't destroy the people and the world in which we live. And there's three legs to the strategy that I'm working on. The first thing is the Bible. And I, for the last 3 years, have been studying the Bible with the world's best biblical scholars. And I'm different because I've got the skills, but I'm a businessman. So I've been asking questions about how to resolve the real problems in society, in business, in capitalism. And the normal biblical scholars can't ask those questions. They don't know the questions. They don't, because it's not in their echo chamber. So what I've been able to do, fortunately, is crazy, is actually get a unique understanding of the Bible, which hasn't been around for 3,500 years, and worked out what the Bible wants us to do in order to build a political economy that actually looks after people and planet. So I'm spending my time sharing those ideas. It's a huge. It's actually looking at the meaning of the whole Bible, what the Christians call the Old Testament. So that's number one, and I think hopefully will excite people. The second aspect of building a sustainable planet is, and the biggest bit is actually the business world, but not the capitalist business world. It's businesses that I'm now starting to work with. I'm out of all my former contractual, profit-driven businesses which employ loads of people, working for people who have big warehouses and want people to work for 18 huge long shifts and do 18 miles a shift. All of that is behind me, fortunately. I'm now met a guy called Gary Klopfenstein, who's based in Chicago, and again, the story is amazing. We were studying the Bible. He was involved in my old business in being part of a restructuring team. He was not successful in helping me, but we hit it off and we started studying the Bible together every fortnight. We connected, and then he said, I've got some businesses, would you be prepared to be a partner? I had no idea what he was doing, put a small amount of money in, but now what I've literally stumbled upon is a genius of a business person. This will interest you, Victor, who actually read the Gospels and set a target at the beginning of his life for how much money he needed to make. And his target was, there's a Gospel, I don't even know which one it is, but he said, that says that you're supposed to make money and then you give it away to the poor people. He did that. He actually got to his target. He set his target for his life. He got there at age 30 and gave it all away, the whole lot, because he thought that's what he was supposed to do. He didn't tell his wife. Crazy it sounds, he didn't tell his wife, and he got home and they're still married, happily married with 2 kids. And then he did it again, set himself the second target for this, and I think it was even a bigger number, and gave it away. And that didn't do it. But this is the guy, I don't know anybody, I've never come across any businessman, a Jew, Muslim, Christian, or without faith, who actually gave away everything they made because of the Bible. But that's what he did. He's an exceptional man. But he now has found a new way of working with state labs and universities in America with a view to identifying technologies that can change the world. And he's running them to change the world. Money is not on the agenda. As it happens, when you come up across these ideas which are changing the world, you make money, but that's not what the purpose is. And these businesses we're going to run together in a unique way, a way that will, I think, change the face of the planet. So that's very exciting work, and there's a number of those businesses, and I'll be exploring those. The third part of my future engagement is going to be reshaping the state. The state, again, based on the Bible, it amazed me, but the Bible, there's no concept of a judge. No one's noticed that, but it's always an advisor. So when it talks about a judge in the Bible, it's not talking about me judging you. It's talking about me advising you so that you can make the decision. It's a different concept. So when Moses judges the people, he advises them of what the law is to enable. He's not telling them what to do. Jephthah actually tells them, this is where you go. That's a normal judge, our Western understanding of a judge. Not in the Bible. Moses is saying, teach people the law so that they can look after themselves. That means minimal state, because the state is all about judgment. It's all about taking decision-making power away from individuals. And that means you might as well be a machine if you're not making decisions. So those 3 things, sharing a new narrative from the Bible, exploring a number of game-changing world-class businesses, and watching how they develop and how people thrive and grow and the planet grows, and a new vision for the state which lets go and doesn't judge and doesn't take decision-making away from individuals is what I think will build a sustainable planet.
These are huge ambitions, aren't they, Mark?
Extremely ambitious. I love that.
Huge ambitions. So I'm going to bring it all the way back down, Philip, to the small business owner being sustainable in the world that we live in? Is it possible?
Well, it's difficult when people are encouraged to, build a team, and then with everything that's going on in the world, that they're gonna shrewdly look for how can I get it done cheaper. I'm not saying that's my philosophy, but that's a reality that we see. How can I go abroad? If I want a virtual assistant, now I can go to the Philippines, for example. I've built my personal team, my personal business around things that are more local and not taken that approach. But I see it happening because I also see the other side of businesses that are extremely struggling, that's almost the only option that they have. So then they do that. So it's almost passing the buck, and it isn't sustainable. I can't tell you I have the solution for it because it's a very complex topic.
Why not?
Give me a couple of hours. But it's an interesting philosophy that Philip was speaking about, these different ideas. It's something I've never considered before, especially from the Bible as well, which I find super fascinating, that I've become closer and closer towards that, I would say, in the last 12 months, how even simple things, like a simple phrase of ask and you shall receive, right? How misinterpreted that could be, because I'm very big when it comes to psychology and what words actually mean versus what they really mean. And I'm confident that there's probably a lot of solutions in there that are in these holy books that maybe we don't have the answer to. Maybe, Philip, you'll have the answer to it.
Keep going.
But
it's 42. But the answer, remember, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the answer to was 42. That's it, it's 42.
But it is very unsustainable, and something needs to change. And I don't know if that's legislation, I don't know if that's a policy, and how do you even enforce that? How many layers of approval would have to happen for that to even be a thing?
It's a really tough one, isn't it, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the world's facing, so many problems, both social and environmental, that I think we need visionary thinkers. So I think I'm really inspired, Philip, by what you've shared there. And I think, even the idea of looking back at these biblical scriptures for how we might find a way forward in today's society is something that's never talked about, really, despite there being so many people living with faith. I think that's something that could be really inspiring for people to think of new ways forward. And I think we do need visionary thinking. I think we do need people that are prepared to completely turn the paradigms in which we live on their head and look at new ways of how we might organise societies, both to include people that are left behind in the current systems, but also to look at the environmental serious crises that we have ahead. For again, being a new dad, you start to think a bit more about that kind of thing, bringing new life into the world. What's it going to be like for future generations? And I think we do need visionary ways of thinking around that. So yeah, really inspired what I've heard there.
Victor, isn't it about a new moral code, surely? A moral code that maybe has been lost over time? Or do we need a new one to cater for the world that we're living in with all the technological advancements?
Yeah, definitely. I think even referring back to a bit of context of what Philip said around the Bible, I think, we're given a beautiful earth. I think you don't see until you travel on a plane and you look outside the window and you see the clouds and the skies and you see it's just magnificent, right? And as humans, we are essentially, we are God's chosen people to have dominion on this earth, essentially to be stewards. So we are given a responsibility to be stewards over animals, plants, everything you see, the whole entire earth. Now, I think what's obviously gone on is as we've produced more, we've talked about economics, if we want to grow our incomes, we are using a lot of the resources. We're using financial resources, we're using physical resources, we're using emotional resources, our effort and our well-being. Now, moral, and how do we sustain it? I think it goes back to this idea of can we continue to preserve, but also be more efficient in the way we do things. And there's lots of different theories, things that are actually very practical and simple. The change in the UK, at least, of the 5p plastic bags, right? 5-10 years ago, there was a time where you never thought about how many plastic bags you're taking, take as many as you go. Now they're around 20p a bag, and not only are they charging on the bags, they're actually reusing them. And it goes to this concept of now a circular economy, which basically means that we try to prolong our resources as much as we can. So we not only before creation or even like property houses, when we design stuff, we have the end in mind. How can we reuse this? And I think that's actually a smart way to look at being more sustainable. And when it comes to morally, unfortunately, some people just don't believe in climate change. I've heard that literally to my face. Some people don't believe in climate change. Some people don't believe in measures of climate or carbon, and some people very much do. That they'll protest and they'll have loud voices about it. Now, where do I sit? I'm not here to like be on either side of things. I just believe we are stewards and we should do our best to steward the earth God given us.
It is a tough one, isn't it? Because there's obviously been a shift in attitude, certainly in my lifetime, where the climate crisis deniers was the norm. But it's definitely now that it's in the goals, as it were, the net zero goals that we see from each country now, which I know that you started off by saying was absolute rubbish. But surely it's just a little bit of evidence that the thinking has changed.
Again, rearranging the deck chairs in Titanic, small stuff isn't going to solve the problem. It just, what I believe is going to happen is we're looking at systemic failure. The system is just in trouble. We produce so much money. Mark, I should say. We recognise interest rates have been pumped up. Most banks are bust, literally, because Mark won't understand this, because their balance sheets have got debts that were lent out interest rates of 1%, now 5 or 6%. That debt is not worth what they lent. So the banks are insolvent. People are insolvent because interest rates means they can't afford their houses because the house prices are too high once interest rates go. And people can't sell their houses, so the market is becoming stagnant. So wherever you look, because of the bubbles that we're in, where we live through, the system is going to collapse. And that gives opportunity for the radical change that I'm talking about. It won't happen unless the system collapses. But once you collapse, I'm asked to be at the table at that point when we're reflecting on what we do. And we can't go back to another banking system. And bank, by the way, is fraud. Be clear, if you look at why banking happened, it was a mistake because banks were lending money that they didn't have, which is actually fraud because they created money. So we've got a system built from fraud. That's very clever. Let's not do that again. No, seriously, start again. Let's start to build from the ground upwards, simple thinking, and get people engaged, rebuild democracy. And stewardship is a very important word because the Bible is crystal clear. We're not owners, we're stewards. We're responsible for looking after people, looking after the planet. And stewardship is right at the heart. We look at ourselves as owners without accountability to others. We're not owners, we are stewards. We're responsible for looking after the resources of the planet. And that includes not over-consuming, not just commoditizing people, not commoditizing the planet. And that it requires a complete rethink from the ground upwards following a systemic failure.
And I'm going to pick up on that for your final thoughts, you three, because we've already had yours, Philip. Can we start again?
It's a big question. Can we start again? What I think will happen, there'll be opportunities to change because economic cycle, there will be a crash. History repeats itself time and time again. So when that does happen, I believe there'll be an opportunity to assess how the UK systems run. I believe there's a general election coming up. We might even see a shift of power, of policies. So we definitely can change. I think it's just the question is very, very difficult to change because a lot of these things happen from top down. Who's in power, but also not just who's in power, but also I guess it's the word I'm looking for, the influence on people as well. I think we need a collective mentality to want to change. If you've got a very few that want to change, that might be radical, have big ideas, and the common population don't, then there's not going to be much change.
Yeah, I think I'd be concerned about the world's ability to change course from the status quo radically as much as I think it's required. I think the pandemic was a big opportunity to hit the big reset button really and look at how we emerge from the pandemic and how we maybe leave some systems behind and reinvent ourselves. as a human race. And but I think the big drive was really to get back as quickly as possible to the way it was. And I think that was possibly an opportunity lost as to look at how we might try and reinvent ourselves. So I think it's critically important from a social and environmental perspective that we do have radical ideas and radical visions going forward. And maybe, as Philip says, it might require a system failure to provoke that, because I think otherwise it's kind of we charge on with the status quo, and the change that we're seeing is not radical enough. So I guess time will tell.
I think we'll be forced to change, and that will come from everything we've been speaking about, which is something like a collapse, because that usually is. Because if the pandemic didn't do it, it done enough damage, then something's got to give eventually, whether that be another recession or something else, and we're seeing signs of that. But there's also another variable of things that we won't go in the rabbit hole today of cryptocurrency, and there is different types of adoption happening. But if you look at fiat currency, I mean, people have been predicting it for 20 years that it will eventually collapse. And if you look at the rates now, the mortgages, like everything is unsustainable. That doesn't last. And from what we can see right now, something will peak before it drops, and that's usually the stock market, which seems to be timed all too carefully.
Mark, Josh, Victor and Philip, you've all been brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.